Let me ask you a question. You're running your team, your performance is okay, but not great, and you're struggling to figure out what you need to do to improve that performance. Where should you look? What should you be inspecting? How do you get your team to perform at a higher level day in and day out? It's a constant struggle for many businesses, but I have Durran Cage, who is an expert trainer and consultant in the automotive industry and other businesses as well to help develop teams to perform at a higher level. So I asked him if he would join me today and break down his strategies so that you, as a listener, have a roadmap to improve the performance of your team. So, very excited about this one. Let's dive into today's episode of You're in Charge Conversations that Spark Change with Durran Cage. All right, so let's just jump right in, Durran. One of your skill sets is helping teams improve performance. You're brought in by companies, especially an automotive dealership. You're brought in, or that your phone rings because they're struggling to achieve some sort of goal and they can't fix it themselves. So when you go in, there's going to be people who run teams and they're going to say, I run into the same thing. We're not meeting our potential. We're not meeting our goals. So if someone asked you what your approach is when you go in to assess this, walk me through maybe the first day of diving in to figure out where you really need to focus.
Great. So that's a great question, and thank you for that. So, uh, I'll be candid with you. I dial in on the numbers first before I make any decisions on what we need to do, because a dealer or a client, I should say, could
Right.
say that they need help in one specific area. Like, hey, we really want to drive home way more appointments, Duran, and we think that you could be our guy to help us out. But then when you look at the data, you'll see that it's not that they need more appointments. They maybe just need more people to actually show up. Or
Right.
it could be, I actually had a conversation recently where we're trying to do all these big things with video. Like, we want to do all these cool things, but we find out that the response time is still over 48 minutes. Like, so there's a process breakdown. So I like to start with, and it's a traditional word, we call it the low hanging fruit. But
Mhm.
I would start with the easiest numbers first, going back between the delivery and the show, then backing it up just little by little and just finding the easiest places for us to fix and then own in on that first. And then we can focus on moving to the next data set or the next numbers that we want to look at. But I always start with the data, because if we just go off of gut or intuition and say, this is what we feel we need help with, I would relate it to a doctor. I go in and let's say I feel like I'm having pain in certain areas. Well, they're still going to assess everything, because
Right.
it might not be your shoulder. I found this out recently. My left shoulder was out. It found out it was my nerves in my back that's doing it. So that's the same way that I approach a dealership: is let's assess everything. Let's look at the numbers and then let's tackle that first. And then we'll move on throughout the process.
So I like that. And I have a friend who always says, my numbers will trump your feelings. Right. So data
Yeah.
number, right? Numbers don't lie. But once you have the data, okay, so let's say
Mhm.
you've assessed the data, is your next step before you even change anything? Are you looking at what they should be doing? I've worked with companies and everybody wants to change everything. And a lot of times I'll say, well, let's see what you're supposed to do first. And are you
Yeah.
even doing what you're supposed to be doing before we adjust? Do you find that that word you use, process, is it that people don't have a process, they're not following the process? What are we seeing once we look at the numbers and start looking down, a little further?
Yeah, and I start to ask with the question, why? Is there a reason why you chose to do it this way? Just to get an understanding. And a lot of times, what we'll find is that it's just how they were taught, or they were not taught, and that's what they thought was the best practice.
Right.
So a lot of times it's stuff that, in terms of training at dealerships, especially, sometimes we're going off of information from 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, that we're still using as today's practice. So that's normally what I like to do first, is just kind of understand the employee first or the employees and just asking, why is it that you chose to do it this way? And then kind of shifting that influence into, hey, maybe we should try doing this because this is what's worked for a lot of my clients. Could you
Right.
see yourself trying this instead? Because what I find is if we go in and telling people that's terrible what you're doing, that won't work, don't ever do it again, do it my way, that doesn't work in this day and age. Or I guess it could work, but the experience for the employee or the person that's receiving the training is not, they're not going to be as happy about that experience. So that's typically how I go about it. First, I want to understand the logic as to why, and then flip that and then just show them how and why based on the numbers. Again, like everything that I'm showing or that I'm teaching, it's backed by data that shows that, okay, this makes sense why we would do this way.
No, and I like that approach because, yes, you're right. You're hired by the dealer or the owner of the business to come in.
Mhm.
There is the assumption of, well, why would you hire me if you were doing it right? So I'm going to come in. And I've seen trainers do
Yeah.
that. They come in and they say, you're all horrible. You don't know what you're doing. Follow my way. And I think that puts everyone, to your point, on a defensive mode because they're just
Yes.
trying to do what either they were told or what
Hmm.
they think they're supposed to do because no one did tell them. So I like your approach to open them up and ask questions. And this is a great tip for all of you who lead teams. What Durran's saying is ask first, ask them why. Why are we doing it this way? How were you taught? What did you remember? A lot of times, and I'd love your take on this. When I've seen things like underperforming teams, it's because they don't have a process written out that everyone follows. It's everyone's doing a little version of their own way, and there's just nothing written down. They're all not playing off the same playbook or singing off the same song sheet. Is that something you run across as well?
Yes, as a matter of fact, literally just before we hopped on this call, I was just messaging a GM of a store that I'll be helping next week. So it's a new client. And they said, hey, would you look at our showroom process and tell us what you think? And I said, well, what we're going to do is we're going to sit down with your leadership team and let's sit down and go through the showroom process. And then let's get your sales team involved. So we're all on the same page of exactly what happens after a customer leaves. There's 100% buy-in, but it starts with the leaders first. And I've always done that because every dealership can be unique. Yeah,
Right.
do I have a standard process that I think that works? Absolutely. But I found that there's a much more success when you get the leaders buy-in and say, okay, day one, that's simple. Like 1 hour after they leave, what do we want to have happen? What do we
Right.
want to happen? And by doing that, goes to what you're saying. It's just using that. It's kind of like we're talking about the customer when we're selling a car. Training is the same thing. We're creating that shared experience. So then that way the employees feel like they're in the driver's seat. And I've had a lot of success with that.
So to that point, why is what what's your opinion on the lack of consistent training? I think most companies, most dealerships that I deal with as well, do a great job bringing on a new person, putting them through that first week of training, maybe a little longer. But I think there's a lack of this idea of ongoing training. It's almost as if when you start performing well, you have it mastered, then I don't need to really focus on you yet. Right now, NBA finals are going on. Those teams, they have coaches. They're the 1% of the 1% of 1%, and they still have coaches working with them every day. Why do you think there is this lack of consistent training to make everybody better?
Yeah, I would say, and it sounds simple, but I would say it really starts at the top. So if me or you're running a dealership and we believe in training and the experience, making sure employee development is key, then it's going to trickle down to where that's going to be something that we expect. But if
Right.
the GM or the owner, if that's not something that really is on the highest of their to-do list and making sure that their leadership is doing that, then that's where, and I hate to make it sound like that, like, oh, the GMs are doing bad. No, it's just that the GMs and the owners have so many things going on that
Right.
even with outside help, so even you take somebody like myself, you still have to have ongoing training and one-on-ones even after I leave, or else it just kind of just goes away. And then I go back to the job description. So when a leader takes that role in the dealership, where is it in his or her job description that there needs to be leadership development and training on an ongoing basis. And then as an employee, same thing. Where is it in the employee description, or where is it that you're telling the employee, like, hey, part of working here at our dealership is you are going to continually do ongoing training. And then there's a roadmap laid out from day zero all the way to, it could be 3 years, depending on where that employee is trying to go. Like, what is their journey supposed to look like? And I think that's what's missing. So we just talked about writing out processes. It's the same thing. We need to write out what the training looks like. Is it going
Right.
to be daily? Is it going to be twice, 2 to 3 times a week? And but that's what I would say is that, number one, at the top, and then number two, it needs to be expected beforehand, because sometimes we hire sales managers, but we think sales managers are just there to just desk deals and just manage the day-to-day people, but they're not spending time investing in the people as well.
See, and I think uh, I really like the word you use, developing your team. I think that's, and maybe that's part of the problem, is training sounds short term, right?
Yes.
Short term. I'm going to train you how to use this. I'm going to train you how to do X. But that's not, to your point, implementing it into their day to day, making sure it's locked in. That's development. So that's why I think sometimes the words training and development, we hear training, we don't hear development, which is an
Yes.
ongoing process where you are mapping something out for a certain period of time where, yes, we're in the classroom and we learn something, but we need to bring that out to the day to day. And are you using this? And how are you using it? And what's the result of using it? And to
Yeah.
your point, maybe I'm not the trainer, so to speak, but
Yeah.
I might be the accountability person. I have to watch what's going on. I have to inspect what's going on. I can look at the results. Now, I may pass them back to you and say, hey, Duran, this person needs some more training, but it's not I think that the more people that focus on that idea of developing, right?
Hmm.
That's what sports teams do. We're rebuilding, we're developing, we're building. And so over time they get better. Um, and so for you out, how do you balance that idea of development where, to your point is, you come in, you work for, let's say you stay for a week, right? That's a
Hmm.
good long period of time. And but then you leave and maybe you come back next month. But what happens? How do you transition what you're doing? How do you get the other people there to transition and do some of the things you were doing to make sure this training sticks?
Yeah, so it's important to make sure that every single day they're keeping up with, and again, I hate for it to go back to the numbers, but they have to keep up with their numbers and make sure that they're on the plan. So, when the training's done, there's always a goal that's set. There's always objectives that are set. And so both me and the employee or the clients, we can see that on a day-to-day basis. So it's really easy to get a gauge to see, are we on target based on
Right.
what we're trying to accomplish, or are we off target? And then if we're off target, you can dig in a little bit further and figure out why. Is it our quality of our calls, our text messages? What is it? Could it be the lead sources? There's a lot of different things that we can dive into. But just like sports, you have to keep your score. So same thing, if you're shooting free throws, it's good to know that you're shooting 80% or 50%. And so it's the
Right.
same thing that we do in the dealerships, is we want to make sure we're keeping track of our score. Are we doing well? Are we batting a good percentage? Or do we need to put in a little bit more practicing? Because I think that's where, again, going back to, I love what you're saying, the development. Training is, okay, here's the how to, I'm showing you. Development is asking the questions after I've left, or my team reaching out and just saying, hey, what is there anything that you're struggling with right now? I always like to ask the question, the last conversation that you had with a customer that you felt just didn't go as well, what did that conversation look like? And that's real life stuff, because in training sometimes there's so many things that we can talk about that never actually happen on a real phone call, or a real conversation,
Right.
because it just goes all over the place. So that's what I'd say, between, let's say, a 1 week at a store, follow up the next month, there needs to be things that are happening in between, not just from my side or a trainer side, but also on the leadership side of the dealership, and that person self-assessing how they're performing. And that's where we get back to those one-on-ones and those check-ins. because we don't want to go 30 days and then come back and look at like, whoa, we did well, or whoa, we did horrible. It should be the whole experience throughout. We're constantly just coaching and mentoring throughout that process.
So that, and I like that. And I want to make sure that those of you who are watching and listening, especially if you're in charge of a team, what Durran just said is that that's daily, not micromanaging. Don't misunderstand. It's watching your numbers. There should be no surprises at the end of the month. You should already know what your pacing is or where you're going, because if you're watching every day or you're watching every other day, you understand that. But again, this idea, which I love what you're talking about, is when you're looking in, if we don't get the results we want, what did we do? I always say actions cause results. So if we
Yes.
didn't get the results we want, we go back to say, what did we do? Right? What did you
Yes.
do? So for your example, using the phone call, well, let's listen to the phone call and we can hear, did you hit your steps? Did you sound enthusiastic? Did you cut them off? Did you answer their, whatever it is, then we can target our training to say this, let's say a phone call, the opening and how you greeted them, that was great. You got into your presentation, great. But when they had a question, you cut them off or you overtalked them, right? So now we say, that's what we're going to work on. And then you go back to your training process. But again, that what I love about it, and for those of you listening, again, focus on the actions, not feelings, not emotions. That's what we're talking about, because then if the numbers are not where they are, or even if the numbers are there, I want to know what I did or what my team did so I can compliment them. And they repeat that behavior. And so for you, when you're out there, do you see enough, little pivot here, do you see enough praise from the people that you're working with? Or is it all, hey, you need to fix this, you need to fix this, you need to fix this?
Not definitely. I would, from what I've seen, I don't see enough praise, because you touched on something. Enthusiasm is we don't talk about that enough. Tonality, enthusiasm on a call. And what I found a lot of times, when there's a lack of enthusiasm and tonality, a lot of times something's going on in that individual's mind, where there's something maybe from home, there's something personal that's going on. I actually had a one-on-one with somebody yesterday, and I said, how are you doing, like personally and business wise? And just like, personally, this is going on. And pretty much she was down and out. And so I just encouraged her to invest in certain books that have helped me to keep going. You have to invest in yourself. But I think that praise is important, because there's no better way to start a day than to praise your team about what went well before, or praising an individual. Like, to me, that is the number one way to drive a behavior, is to praise what the behavior is that you're searching for. That's like the number one thing I preach with leadership. Like, whatever you want, whether it be, I want you guys to all TO. Okay, praise the people that are TOing the day before and talk about the story of what happened when they did that behavior, and recognize that. And it's like the children in us, we all enjoy getting a little bit of praise. Even social media, the best post and best engagement I've ever had is when I praise my clients or I praise other people. The
Sure.
algorithms go nuts. And so, yeah, so more praise. I call it, the phrase I use is praise in public, punish in private, is what I've always said.
Absolutely. And I think it's
Yeah.
very similar, as you said, your children, if you, let's say that you have children,
Mhm.
children want your approval. They're going to do the things that you praise them for. They're going to
Yes.
run away from the things that are negative. They're going to figure that out. So to your point, and for those of you listening here who are, as I said, in charge of teams, and that's why we developed this channel, was to give you these tactical things that Durran's talking about, is I don't think everyone does, sometimes it's a big broad brush. Oh, that call was horrible. That presentation was horrible. Like, maybe pieces of it. I'm sure we could find something they did well and break it down and say, well, this part was great. This part was great. This part wasn't. We're going to fix that. So again, we compliment what went well. And usually it's a piece of something. Very rarely is it a broad brush. You're not, and same thing, even if it's working, that doesn't mean
Yeah.
it's all perfect. You could be doing this well and this well, but we could still work on this and get you even further. So by focusing on the actions, by complimenting them on specifics. And that's, for me, that's one of the biggest problems I see in training and ongoing training is people speak in generalities, right?
Yeah.
Hey, this was a great call. What does that mean? Hey, even to your word, I need you to be enthusiastic. I remember one time I was working with a salesperson who was on the phones, and I said, you have to be more enthusiastic. And they were incredibly monotone. Okay, whatever you want. No, I'm enthusiastic. In their mind, that was enthusiasm for them. So I
Yeah.
had to figure out a way for them to say, well, how about if I told you to, can you make your voice bounce off the back of they were in a little cube, back off the back of the cube? Could you project your voice as if you were talking to someone over there? Or I'd get them talking about, forget the script. I'd say, what's your favorite sports team? And it was like a light switch.
Oh yeah.
They would sit there and go, oh man, I'm a fan of this. And I said, well, where's that person on the phone? Can we have that same? Do you see your body, how you sat up? Right. And so it became tactical things they could do and tricks, because when you get up in those words to say, okay, stand up there, Durran, and be enthusiastic, what does that mean? But if I said, I need you to stand up tall, I need you to project your voice, I need you to say the first sentence and stop, right? Those are things that people can do in
Yes.
order to achieve the goals. So let's pivot a little bit here. Let me talk about you, because I really like your journey. I mean, you were in dealerships, you moved up through the dealerships, and now you have your own company. Talk to me in this idea of training, because one thing you mentioned in the pre-show before we jumped on, and you just mentioned it right now when you were recommending books. It's this idea of investing in yourself. So talk to me a little bit about your journey in the dealership. Was there great training? Was it sporadic? Was it you had to figure it out yourself? Walk me through your journey to where your how you built your success.
Yeah. So on the dealership side, I found a level of, I don't know what the word is, but joy when you train and develop somebody and you watch that person grow, make, do well financially, and then move on up or either move into another dealership and be a leader there. And so when I started seeing that happening, that's where this loving to train people and to help people out, ultimately that's the whole goal. That's
Right.
where that passion fueled from. So back in the internet days, really just getting better and spending a lot of time with my people, I found that the more time that I spent with them, the better it got, versus a lot of times you just want to get on the phones and you just want to do all these tasks. But I started noticing the more that I would just keep pouring into my team, the better it got. And they were with me. My first team was with me for like 3 years straight. It was beautiful. And then so when we moved into the general sales manager role, when that happened, same thing, pouring into people. But what I found as a GSM is I couldn't do it all anymore. It was impossible. So what I had to do was then empower my sales leaders to do the training. So I would train them and then they would actually train their team. And then we just had a system where, like, if you got hired on working for me, there was already 3 weeks worth of, okay, this manager's going to do this day. We're going to do this topic on this day. So I really love that when people came in and they got a lot of good training. And so in terms of now with the business side, when I started that in 2018, when I was training dealerships, I was training it because that was my passion. That's what I like to
Right.
do. But in terms of running a business, I was horrible. Like I absolutely had no idea what I was doing. I mean, my first client, they had to tell me what documents were needed. They were like, "Sir, where's this document? Where's your W?" And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And so then I run into an email, or it was like a campaign or something from my business coach now, is Corey Mosley, and it was just like, "Hey, if you're good at what you're doing, but you still feel lost, you might need some help." So anyways, fast forward, so I invested in a coach, a mentor, to help me get better at business, to help me get better at what I'm doing. And that has been single-handedly one of the best decisions I could have made. And it's not just my business coach, but it's also tons of books. I mean, if I look here, I've got Cumulative Advantage, there's books all over my desk. Some of them I hadn't even read yet, but it's important to keep investing in yourself, because if we're not, then you kind of get stagnant. The same person that you're seeing today is not the same person that you saw in 2018. You can actually look at the content, look at the videos, and you can see like, whoa, like this Duran's developing. He's actually becoming a better, not just a better business person, he's becoming a better person, which is even more important. And so that's helped because, as I was telling you in the pre-show, it's so much easier for me to talk to a dealership about the importance of investing in their people when I spend a lot in terms of investing in myself, both financially and just through education, but extremely important. That's probably been the single best thing. So when I talk to people and they say, how have you been able to get to where you're at now? I mean, each year, literally, we've doubled revenue. And I would say, hands down, it's been investing in myself and investing in my team. Like, that is the single best thing that could ever happen. And I think you've seen it as well. When dealerships do the same, typically a well-run organization, I
Mhm.
bet you on their line items, on their financial statement, the true investment, not just the OEM stuff, and there's nothing wrong with the OEMs at all, but
Right.
the true investing into your team and pouring them in. And, when's the last time a dealership maybe hired a public speaker, somebody like yourself to come and just pour into their dealership, or a motivational speaker, all these people? You don't really see that much in the auto industry, but you will see it among sports and other industries because they understand the importance and the value of really just pouring into their people.
No, and I listen, I think that's spot on. My son is at a basketball camp this week. And on Wednesday afternoon, near the end of that day's camp, actually it's today that we're recording this, they're bringing in someone to talk about the mental approach to basketball, right? So
Yeah.
I agree. I think we bring in trainers that can help us develop the skill, but what about bringing someone in to talk about your finances and helping your employees balance their finances, or bring someone in to talk about health? Because,
Wow.
as we all do, I just had a guest on last week talking about how, folks who travel all the time, like you do, how do you stay healthy, eat healthy, work out? What about that in bringing those types of people into your business? Uh, so this way, again, you're providing value and growth for your employees, which in turn I think helps with retention, because you're doing something different than just, here's another trainer to help us do our job better. They're talking, to your point, which I love, is we're trying to make you better people. We're investing in you in
Yeah.
totality, because if you understand your finances and then you feel comfortable that, at home, then that's going to translate to your mental state here. And if you are physically fit and physically healthier, or maybe the dealership is investing, or the business is investing in partnering with a local restaurant to bring certain foods in. I mean, I agree with you. It's this idea of developing, but the bigger point is understanding that you have to take responsibility to invest in yourself. So as you did, you reached out to a business coach, you're reading. So for all of you watching, yes, it is part of the responsibility of your leaders, whose team you're on, to help you and to give you some training and development. But it's part of your responsibility to say,
Yes.
what can I do on my own to invest in myself?
Yeah, man, that's huge. And to add on to that, the best clients that I have, the ones that do really well, those are the ones that have leaders that's how they look at me as their business coach, and they'll ask me questions like, be candid with me. What do you see that I could be doing better at as a leader? And
Right.
you don't really hear that often because there's a lot of pride, whether female leaders, male leaders, or whichever. A lot of times we don't slow down to ask that question. Just say, hey, you've been working with our store now for a few months. I see what the team's been doing, but how could I be better as a leader? What do you
Right.
see out there that could help me serve my people better? And I mean, that's really good. So it goes again. The more leaders focus on developing themselves, it pours, and it's just a trickle down effect to the rest of the team where they see it, and then now they're pouring into themselves as well.
Yeah, and it's funny. You can also, for people who do that, I do. I had to learn because I get excited about things. And then on our staff calls with my team, I say, oh, this book, and oh my God. And after a while they said, oh God, please don't read another book because now he's coming in with a new idea. So you do have to balance that enthusiasm, but also find a way to say, well, how does this fit into our current process, right? You don't want, I am sure your teams that you're out there dealing with, any business, right? I know we both serve automotive for a good portion of our business, but even businesses that are outside automotive, when their leaders go away to conferences or these groups and they're hanging around other people with new ideas, they come back in and it's, oh, we're changing everything and we're doing that. And people go, please don't go away. Don't come back with more ideas, versus saying, does this idea fit into what we're doing already? And then how do we implement that? So let me ask you on that. So leaders who are running teams, someone comes back and says, we're going to pivot to do something. What's your recommendation, right? So I'm going to be the person who you're coaching, and my boss tells me we need to change X, Y, and Z. How do you guide them? What's your process to implement and change or a new idea? How do you actually do that and communicate that to the team to get them on board? Walk me through your process.
Yeah, so very similar to, what we talked about earlier. Let's slow down real quick and let's look at the data and make sure the data supports the decision that we're going to make. Are we
Right.
making this decision because it made you feel good when you saw somebody talking about it? Or is this something that, based on statistics and data, consumer feedback, that this would be a good direction for us to go? And so then if we look at that, and it's like, yeah, actually we should go with this. Then we have to make sure that we break it down bit by bit, because a lot of times it's never just one little thing that you need to come back to your dealership and do. Typically, it's about a series of a few different things that have to happen. And so it's important to focus on one thing first. So, it could be an example. Imagine all the people that have gone about the digital retailing. I'm sure
Right.
that could be a whole nother show.
Oh yeah.
Well, the first step that you have to slow down on is, do we have the culture for it? Like, yeah, I understand that we can sell more and there's maybe more profitability if that's the numbers that you were told. But does our culture align with that? Like, are we okay? What does a digital retailing shopper look like? What do they want? And so we have to, for that scenario, we'd have to make sure that our culture and get our people bought in on that first, because that's a whole different process. And so that's kind of how I would look at it. Is, do we have the right people for it? Do we have the right processes already set up for it? Do we need to tweak some things? Is our marketing going to match this message? Do we need to change our marketing? So those are the kind of questions that I would ask you, just like, not playing devil's advocate, but just make sure that, okay, so if we're going
No,
to do this,
yeah,
what's
no,
the
I
first thing that we would do? You
absolutely.
know?
I don't think it's devil advocate. I think that's spot on. And for those of you listening, that what Durran just said, it's, I always equate it to the octopus, right? Or it's the throwing the stone into a pond, there's ripples, because any
Yeah.
changes that I make, for argument's sake, on the sales side, well, how does that affect the other departments? Or how does that, right? So there, what does that mean I have to do on my website? What does that have to do in terms of marketing, right? And I love the way you broke it down and focused on your culture first, right? And even if you take it a step further to, and because you touched on it, was, what do we want our customers to feel when they interact with this, right? What are we trying?
Yes.
What's point B? I had a boss, that's what he would always say to me. Well, what's point B in this discussion? So if we're saying, well, we want it to be easier for our customers to interact, or I want to give some
Yes.
control to the customer to be able to figure out a few things. Awesome. That's great. How do we do that? Then it's backing it out to say, well, to your point, what does that mean for our current processes? What does that mean for technology? Right? Sometimes they put the cart before the horse. They get the technology and try to force their process in, versus finding the right technology to support your team. But to your point is, everything then we back out and say, well, okay, well, then what changes do we have to make to the website? Okay, well, we made that change. We took away forms and it's going to go right to chat. Okay, well, who's answering the chat? Someone there, someone here. When they do, right? It's literally mapping it out on the whiteboard before you make any changes, because it could sound very simple
Mhm.
in theory until you go, oh boy, look at all of this that we have to do. And then to your point is you start hacking it into small pieces, prioritize. So I really love the way your approach is. And again, for those listening, it's that idea of here's a big piece of pie or a big, big, and we cut it into bite-sized pieces so that we can consume it in the right order. And, over time we'll eat the whole thing, but we can't shove it all in our mouth at the same time. It just doesn't work that way.
Absolutely.
So as we roll through this in terms of the training, there's two things that I'd love your take on, because these are questions I get from people running teams all the time. And I love your take on it. How do you deal with the veteran employee who does produce, maybe not the best, but they produce, who doesn't want to follow your process? And then what do you do with the high performing person who is very vocal about, I don't like your process, right? So we have two disruptors here. One is maybe quietly just going, I'm not going to do your process. And then you have the vocal person who is out here just bad mouthing everything, vocal about, I don't have to do it, but hey, I'm the top performer, one of the top performers. And that idea of I'm invincible. You're running a team, especially if you're new at running a team. This is where I see a lot of struggles are. Someone's new to this. How do you handle those two people? What would your take be to handle those two people?
Those are the funnest too, right? Well, it goes back to we have to use influence and facts to back what we're trying to teach. So you can't just come in and say, here's how we're going to do it. This is what works. So when it comes down to the veteran, you almost need to find out what their goal is. Like, are you happy just being where you're at?
Right.
Because if they're happy with being where they're at and they have no intention on growing and they don't want to grow themselves, and it's almost impossible because that means they're not going to want to do anything. But most veterans, when you talk to them, like, would it be interesting to grow a little bit more in terms of growing financially and growing more professionally? And once that answer is a yes, like, yeah, I mean, I am, then that's when like, so the reason why we should do X is because the results and the data show that this is what could happen. And this would take your overall sales growth to another level. So I'll give a perfect example. I was doing a Zoom call with one of my clients, and there was a veteran who pretty much outright cussed at me because I was asking him to the importance of email and a video. And he said, I don't understand why you keep harping on this email and video thing. And I said, because statistically, it's the number one for engagement, okay, two, the experience that it gives the customer, and three, the leverage that it's going to give you over your competition. I said, but ultimately it's about the experience that we're going to deliver to the customer. Well, on that same call, another employee that's a little bit newer we were going through their opportunities, and he sends a video email to a customer that's a walk around, it's an email only. Would you believe that 2 hours later that customer comes in and buys a vehicle from this young man's video walk around while the veteran had just got onto me? So when we had our next week's call, the new guy had told me, he's like, hey Durran, guess what, this worked. And so then on that next call, do you know what that veteran was saying? Okay, Durran, walk me through how we do this
Right.
again, and let's get
Exactly.
so making sure that you have some proof and some foundation. And I think one thing that helps you and I also is that we've been doing this for a while too. So I get it. Like, if I've been selling cars unprofessionally since 2002, then professionally since 2008. So I've seen me, as a horrible salesperson. I've seen me develop as a salesperson. So I'd like to let veterans know, like, listen, I get it. And sometimes change is not the most comfortable thing. Even for me, like doing videos at the very beginning, that was not something I was comfortable with. Now we're sitting here
Right.
talking on video and it maybe feels natural, but at the beginning, I was the worst thing in the world on video. And most people might not believe that. So that's how I would handle that person, and just really just go along with them and show them, like, give them the evidence, the proof, and show why this would benefit them. And it's very similar to the high performer. So the high performer that's already doing well, like, why do I need to change my approach? Why do I need to do this? Again, what is it ultimately that you want as a high performer? Do you want to grow? Like, do you want to level up? Because in any profession, they're all working on growing. Sports, even in medicine, if you're a doctor, whatever you're doing, you're constantly trying to evolve and grow. Because if you and I were sitting here still talking about what we were teaching 10 years ago that we're talking about now, we would both be
Right.
gone.
Right.
And that's what I would tell the high performers, like, yes, you're doing a great job, you're doing phenomenal. Use this to add on to your business and let me show you how this could complement what you're already doing. So whenever I'm talking to a high performer, I really ever try to challenge them to change a thing. It's more about how we can add on
Right.
to help them grow and scale, whether it be AI, we're talking about artificial intelligence, video, social media, whatever it is that maybe they're missing. And I see that, hey, there's a better way. A lot of high performers then will listen if it sounds like they could grow their network and they don't have to invest a lot of time with whatever they need to do, and the return on their time invested is going to be great at 10x. Then that's typically how I would get their attention. And then again, sharing stories, like, I think stories connects more than anything. So if there's other high performers that I've worked with that have used some of the practices that I've asked them to put into place, I'll refer them, like, hey, here's a
Right.
salesperson over here that's selling 48 cars a month and they're doing some of this as well. I'll be glad to share their information and you can talk to them. And that is extremely valuable because now it's not Duran idea, it's, whoa, so there's other people doing this.
Yeah,
And
so you're
sometimes that could be what
validating.
moves
Yeah,
them.
you're right. You're validating it salesperson to salesperson. It's very similar.
Yeah.
I always talk about I could talk to dealers, but when dealers talk to dealers, they have their own
Yes.
language and it confirms it. So salesperson to
Yes.
salesperson goes, no, this stuff really works. They're like, all right. Um, so again, for everyone listening, a lot of great information there. Remember, we're not confronting them. We're not telling them they're wrong. We're asking, right? What's the hesitation? Why are you not adapting? A lot of times it's because they don't understand what you're really asking them to do. Why? Because you came out with just some declaration to say, we're going to make this change without walking through why. People need to understand why. Why are we making this change? What's in it for them? If you apply that, you can win them over, right? And again, it may take you a little longer than a new person who's coming in who doesn't know any different. They're going to follow the rules because they don't know any different. This person is maybe has a little, is going to push back on you. But again, state your case to what Duran was saying with numbers. What's in it for them? Why? Why is it important for them? And the one I would also say, just as an extra little tip on top of what Duran was saying, was if you have somebody who's vocally against what you're doing, like disruptor, I don't care how great they are, you got to pull them aside and you got to
Yeah.
say, listen, give me a break. Stop with that. That's disruptive. If you and I can have an agreement and we'll work on our own thing over here, but I don't need you challenging me in meetings or you going around and going, don't do what Glenn said. You don't have to do that. That's not acceptable. You want to do your process, I'll add into you, I'll help you get better. But it's that challenge of disruption that's unacceptable. And you have to, apply to them and stroke their ego. And to your point, high performers love to be praised. So
Yeah.
lean on them and stroke their ego and say, listen, you do know everybody watches you. Man, it would really help me out if you supported me or you didn't say that because they're looking for you. And I could say it, but if you're doing it, they're going to do it. They may not even realize. Many times they're going to say, oh, I was just kidding. Like, yeah, but these people don't know you're kidding. I know you're kidding. They don't know you're kidding. So again, it is allowing you. And I love what you've been saying all day is reach out first, ask questions. Don't just come in and say, I'm smarter than you, be quiet. That I just don't think anybody responds well to that.
No, they really don't. And I love that you said why, because I didn't even realize it until you said that. But a lot of times I'll answer my own question. So I'll say, hey, we should say this on the call. And then I say, but I want somebody to say, Duran, why? And they'll say, why? And then I'll explain because it's really important, especially in this day and age. And I think I do it myself. I probably just don't even realize it. If somebody's telling me to do something, I typically am always going to ask why. Like if you told me right now, Duran, hey, you should really try doing this, I'll probably shake my head. Yeah, like, why do you say that? And then you're going to say, because of this, 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 and this. I'm like, oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Right.
So
Right.
I,
Yeah.
I
So
really
when
do
I,
believe that's
yeah,
so
when
important.
I, yeah, when I train, I always, the first three steps are here's what we're going to do. Here's why, right?
Yeah.
Why, what's in it for you, why it's good for the business, why I think we need to change. And then we go into how we're going to do it. And then we dive into actual training. But I agree with you. I think most people, we never liked it as kids. When our parents said, just do it because I told you, you're all going, I don't like
Why?
that. And you're sitting there, well, I don't understand that because I said so. Nobody liked that as a kid. Nobody likes that as an adult in any sort of business. You walk away mumbling, going, yeah, this is why I never liked that guy or that gal. I don't
Right.
like that. So as we wrap up, I have a couple other questions about you mentioned something, and I want to expand a little bit on it, because you said, especially with this new generation and everybody. I mean, I had a few episodes ago, I had Mark Beal. He's an author and expert on Gen Z, this next generation coming into, I think they're the ones who are just coming out of college right now. And, he's a professor at Rutgers University. So he's constantly with these individuals. But as you see this new generation, and again, you're around them, what are some of the things in terms of training and development that we need to be aware of for them in order to help them? If I'm running a business right now, what are some of the key things I need to want to track them, hold on to them, help them get developed? What are they looking for?
I would say number one is clarity,
Mm,
making sure that it's extremely clear what it is that they need to be doing and what they're going to be doing. So before they even get hired, like, clarity is so important, because you don't want to bring in somebody like that where you're saying you're coming here to sell cars. And then they get there and they're spending time having to post, have to do this, have to do that. Like, all that needs to be thoroughly done in the job description and in the interview, providing clarity in terms of what exactly their day looks like. What does your day to day look like? How does it work? How much time is going to be spent? And then the second thing that I would say would be the roadmap. Like, do they have the ability to grow? What does that look like? So, a thing that's so hot right now that everybody's been talking about is gamification. When you're doing apps and you're doing training, there's
mhm.
gamification that's so
Yep.
important. So what does your gamification look like for your dealership, for that new employee? Like, how can they get rewarded? Like, what points can they get for hitting certain levels after 90 days of doing this much training and selling this many cars and having this kind of Google ratings review? What does that coin look like? And I
Right.
think if we're able to do that, where we make the dealership, and I know it sounds crazy, but make the dealership fun, like, keep it cool. I mean, how do you think Apple and Amazon and Google are able to attract all these people? Is because if you ever get a chance to go those places, and I hadn't yet, but I've worked with a big company where they made it look really cool to come work for them. Like, have
Sure.
just, so you want to make sure that the atmosphere is welcoming, but most importantly, it's clear about what they're going to be doing, how they have to do it, what's expected. And then number two is making sure that there's a good roadmap for them on how they can succeed, and just making sure that the journey is fun along the way, and just embracing what they have to bring to the team. I think that's the kicker. A little bit of freedom. Just let them come in and just have some fun and let them explore, because I think they could come into the dealership and bring some ideas that we don't even think about because we're in it every single day. So I would want to be getting their feedback as much as possible, as a 18-year-old or a 19-year-old comes into the dealership, and just asking, is there anything that you think that we could be doing better, like from what
Right.
you've seen from a
Well,
marketing
that
standpoint?
I agree with you. I
Yeah.
just think a lot of dealers or people are not there yet, but I think you're right. I think you're 100% right, because I would have said both of those as well. I think one of the keys is, where am I going to be like 3 years from now? Um, but being clear to them, saying this is your first year, then here's where you could go and here's where you could go. I think the other piece is how you're going to help them get there. I think it's really
Yes.
important that
Yeah.
they understand that you're going to coach them and help them. They don't respond, right? I have a 16-year-old, so he's sort of smack in the middle of this Gen Z. Um, they don't respond to just do it.
No.
They've always had an opinion. That's the key. You know, I'm older than you. I come from the generation of kids are not seen, you know, kids are seen and not heard. And you didn't talk back and you didn't have an opinion, you know, I'll tell you when I want your opinion. Right. And now these kids are, and young adults, they talk all the time and they feel that they have a valid opinion. And in some of these young individuals, this is what this gentleman, Mark Beal, said, is they feel that, listen, if Duran's not going to help me, I'll go start my own business. It's a
Right.
very entrepreneurial generation of, well, I'll just go build my own business. I'll flip things online. I'll go do whatever it's going to be. So they don't need you. They want to be there, but they don't need you. And to your point is, I think it's really important to start understanding how they consume content and so when you're marketing to them, where are they? Because my son does not watch, both of my sons, I have a 14 and a 16-year-old. They don't watch regular TV. Everything's on demand, but mostly they consume YouTube and maybe Instagram. So if you want to get in front of them, running a commercial is not going to work. Right. So understanding what connects to them, what's fun for them, what's entertaining for them, that's a whole, and I love your idea of just bringing them in and saying, hey, look at what we're doing. What do you think? And be open to that, because that's over the next 5 years, they're coming into the market with money.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what I would do even for my own business. If I had, a Gen Z, it's like an 18, 19, that would be one of the first things I would ask as we get going. Like, hey, talk to me. What are you seeing that we could be missing? And I would
Right.
listen. Doesn't mean we do everything, but I think it's important. But, and really, and we could say that for all employees as well. So it's not just the younger ones, because some of the best
No,
ideas I've ever received have come from the people that are on your front line.
sure.
And so it's a good mix, men, women, young, old. It's always good to just get that feedback, because your next biggest idea that could take your dealership or your company to the next level literally could come from one of your employees and just listening to them.
No, I think that's a perfect spot to sort of wrap everything we've been talking about. Is I think that's incredible. A great leader listens and asks
Yes.
questions. And you're right. I remember being told that by an employee. I came into the business, there was a bunch of offices. And so I traveled to one that was underperforming, and I, did what you did, bring them in a room. Let's talk, what's going on. And I said, but why aren't you doing what we had laid out? And they laughed, because one person raised their hand. And they said, well, Glenn, it might sound great in your ivory tower up there in the corporate office, but out here, it doesn't work. Here's what needs to happen. So again, it's that idea of, I think it looks good on the whiteboard, looks good on paper, but when we actually execute, if I'm not willing to get feedback from the front line, then you're right. I don't care how great your training is. If the execution isn't working and you're not willing to get that feedback to tweak what you're doing, that's where successful teams and companies, because there's communication both ways, up and down the line, and people feel comfortable coming up to you as the owner and saying, excuse me, can I talk to you? This is not working. I think it's important. So
Absolutely.
great. So at the end of all of our stuff, and first off, I want to thank you. This has been fun. You and I could sit here and chat about this all day.
Sure could. Thank you,
Yeah.
Glenn.
So we usually I ask 4 or 5 fun questions, sort of behind the mic, who you are, just silly, fun questions. So don't think too hard about them, but let's jump right in. Favorite cheat food? You look like you're in good health, but what's the one thing you're like, gotta have that?
Ooh, gosh, I would say right now what I have a taste for would be, man. So I like deep dish pizza. I'm
Oh,
easy, but I would like pizza. I would like a serious vegetable pizza, because we don't really. My
look at
wife's not
that.
big
You're
into the
trying to
meat
be good
thing.
with the vegetable
Yeah,
pizza.
I
You're
got to
like,
be careful what I say, because if she hears me, all this stuff,
yeah, yeah,
if
yeah,
she hears
yeah.
me,
It's funny
she's
you
like,
say that, because I've had some guests and they're going, oh man, I love ice cream. And then they're like, oh, I hope that I'm not supposed to be eating
Yeah,
that. Right,
she's gonna
right.
be like cheat. She's gonna be like pizza. Like,
Pizza.
yeah, but no, I
But look,
I,
I
I
got
really do. I love
vegetables,
a good.
Olive. I have vegetables.
That's right. But I love a good pizza.
All right. Favorite cartoon as a child?
I really like Popeye. I was a big Popeye
Nice.
kid.
All
Yes.
right. What's a movie or a show that you stop and watch when you run across it and you just got to stop and go, ooh, and you finish it? What is it?
Pur- Pursuit of Happiness, hands down. That's one of
Oh,
my favorite movies. Every time I see it, it doesn't matter which part of the movie I always watch, whether it's the hard parts or the good parts, but Pursuit of Happiness always makes me stop.
there you go. Something that you're reading now that's inspiring you that you would recommend to someone else.
Yeah, this Cumulative Advantage by Mark Schaefer is a really good book. It just talks about getting a little bit better every day, just 1%. If you can get yourself 1% better or connect with 1% more people, then over time it just compounds. And it was just a good refresher to hear because it's just the truth. If you just get a little bit better every day instead of trying to become this expert in
Right.
one day, but just do one little thing that gets you a little bit better in your field. And over time, it's a cumulative advantage that helps you become better in your field.
Great. So we'll put that in the show notes. Um, let's see. Go back to the 14-year-old Duran. Similar, driven as you are now, different. What if we went back and looked, what similarities do you see between your 14-year-old and now where you are now?
Very driven and entrepreneurial. Damn, definitely. I was always hardworking then. I always stayed busy. I would play sports, bag groceries, study at night, play video games when I could, and get up in
Right.
the morning and do it all over again. I never realized it till this year. I was like, man, how do I just keep going? But all my life has been just, I always stay doing something. I rarely ever just stay put. So I think that's where the 14-year-old me helped out, that I wasn't too lazy. I was lazy in some areas, but when it came to work, I loved to work at an early age.
That's great. That's great. Um, okay. I have two more questions. Your close circle of friends. What's the one word they would use to describe you?
Hmm. I mean, the close circle of friends,
Yeah.
they would call me. They would be like, this guy's he's a comedian. They would say, because I'm always trying to make people laugh and have a good time. So that's what the close circle. The business circle would probably say driven, but the personal circle would be like, this guy is hilarious, or at least is trying to be. I'm not going to say that they think I'm funny. I'm trying to be funny, but it doesn't mean
Try.
they always laugh. But
Good.
yeah,
All right. So last question. We've talked about a lot of things. And so again, the people who are watching this, hopefully they're the ones who are, they want to become better leaders, better trainers, things of that nature. So out of everything we talked about, if there was one thing you wanted them to walk away with, what is that one thing?
I would say what we ended with: listen to your people. I think the answer is right there. Just keep it simple and listen, because I that's where it's helped me a lot. Is just ask questions, close your mouth, and listen, and that will answer any problems or solutions that you're looking for. But just listen to your people first before you tell your people what you want them to do.
Oh, that's great. I love that. I love that. So listen, I thank you so much. This has been so much fun. I appreciate getting to know you a little more now through this. So if the audience wants to reach out to connect with you, where on social media do you hang out, and how could they connect with you if they want to talk to you more about helping them as well?
Mostly LinkedIn is the easiest one. That's the platform that I enjoy. It's a professional network. So LinkedIn, or they can, if you just Google Durran Cage with two R's, like Duran Duran, but Durran Cage, there's not too many of me out there. So you can always Google, and you can visit my website through there. But LinkedIn is typically the easiest place to find me.
Okay, great. Yeah, and we'll put all of your contact in the show notes as well. So again, I
Cool.
appreciate it. Thank you so much. So for all of you who are still watching, as we say, as we wrap up every episode, just make sure that you subscribe. Hit that notification so you don't miss episodes like our conversation here with Duran and others. The goal is to help you learn those skills to make you a better leader so you can achieve the life you want, both professionally and on the business side, personally as well. Achieve all of those goals. Don't forget to share this out. There's probably someone in your network that could use this information, and put your comments down below. I'd love hearing from you. If there's someone you want me to interview, or if there's a topic you want to discuss, throw it down there and we'll go get it as well. Again, I appreciate your attention. It means the world to me. And as I end every episode, you're in charge, but Durran has now given you a few more tools to help you become more successful and achieve the life you want. So thanks again for your attention. Thanks again, Durran. Appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.
Thank you, Glenn. Appreciate you.